Good morning, this is Heather Hoffman, and today I'm going to share a card using kind of a technique I haven't seen used a lot lately. I used to see it around a lot, called the chalkboard technique. I'm starting off with a square of Midnight cardstock that I've die cut with Stitch Squares dies, and I've already lined up on my Misty stamping tool my floral stamp from Elegant Florals and my sentiment stamp, which is from The Most Beauty. And the first thing I'm going to do is run an embossing powder tool over the top of that panel. This will keep my embossing powder from sticking to anything I don't want it to. And I'm just using a clear watermark embossing ink pad. And because I have it lined up in the Misty, I can stamp it multiple times, especially that solid Elegant Floral. I end up stamping it several times. That right there was probably fine, but it looked like there was one little spot in the middle of the florals that I just wasn't quite happy with how much it inked up. And then I accidentally grabbed the wrong ink pad, so ignore that part as I clean off my white pigment ink. I got a little bit ahead of myself. That'll come in a little bit here in the next step of the process. But I love being able to line it up in my Misty and just get a tiny bit more ink in the spots I want. I've started storing my embossing powder in a little container. So I'm adding some white embossing powder over my image and over my sentiment and shaking off the extra. You can grab just a clean paintbrush to brush off any little excess powder that doesn't come off on its own. And then I'm going to pull out my heat tool and really quickly heat set this. And even at this point, this makes a beautiful image. You don't even have to do anything else. The chalkboard effect that we're going to add is just one more little step that adds a little bit of fun detail and layering. So I've left everything lined up in my Misty, but I'm going to pull the sentiment out at this point. I found for this part, I have a hard time keeping a fine detail sentiment like that nice and clear, but I'm attaching that panel with my magnets, but notice I'm moving it just slightly up and to the left, and then I'm re-inking that flower stamp with white pigment ink. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but it adds a little bit of a shadow, kind of a drop shadow effect, which is just kind of a fun little detail. And I didn't do that again on the sentiment just because on a fine detail sentiment like that, it seems just to kind of muddle the words a little bit too much. Now I'm going to grab, you can just use your finger for this part, and I've totally done that before, grab my white pigment ink pad, but I really like to use just a little wedge, makeup foam wedge. They're really inexpensive and really easy to use for this, and then you can use them for a little while and throw them away when they get worn out. But just add some little smudges. This kind of mimics the chalk dust that you would see if you were looking at a real chalkboard. Now I forgot at this point, but once this is dried a little, it's a good idea to wipe that extra pigment ink off of the top of the heat embossed florals. I did get to that later after the video finished. Now I'm going to do my card front, and I've built a top folding card base using flamingo cardstock. And I have a little panel of iced aqua that I've die cut on two sides using Edge Essentials. Instead of making a big panel that fits behind that whole square, I just die cut the edges of a little piece that's the same width as my card front, and then I cut it in half real quick with my paper trimmer. It's just a good way to conserve your cardstock and use up some little scraps that you might have left over from another project. And then if you just attach them to the top and the bottom with a little bit of adhesive, no one's the wiser that it doesn't go all the way down. And if it doesn't perfectly line up, I don't think I got the width exactly on. There was just a hair of cardstock hiding over the edge, so I just used my scissors to trim that real quick so you couldn't see it from the front of the card. Now at this point, before I adhered it, I decided it needed a little bit of a twine bow to finish things off, so I grabbed my jute string and I'm gonna tie a quick bow around the front there. And then attach it with foam adhesive to the front of my card base. And again, a little bit after this video finished, I did grab a clean cloth and I kind of wiped that excess pigment ink that was sitting on top of the white heat embossed florals, because it really won't dry there, but you need to give it some time so that your shadow effect can dry and you don't end up smudging that off. But really carefully just wrap a cloth around the tip of your finger and gently rub off the excess there so you don't have to worry about that. And it works really well and really simple and really easy. So once I've attached that with foam adhesive, we're all done. Love to know what you think. How long has it been since you have tried to make a card with the chalkboard technique? Hopefully this inspired you to try one again. Thanks so much. Have a great day.